So if not, let us just check what we can do to measure putting with SAM PuttLab. I just need to go to some place where we can just do measurements without hurting other data. Let's just go here. So this is the SAM PuttLab 7 software, and we redesigned it in PuttLab 6 in a way that it's much more easy to use because you have all the functions down here for measuring and for recording data. The report section is over here. This is the data which is stored, and then you have other options up here, and I will go through this in a little bit. So let's just start with a measurement. And now already here, you see that we follow a specific concept which is different from others. If we do a measurement, we say you need to measure repeatedly a couple of putts. It might be 7, it might be 10. And I also will explain afterwards why we measure, in the first instance, a repetition of putts. We think that to understand your individual performance profile in putting, it is not enough to have one putt. And I will be able to show you afterwards that even if you look at tour players, you would be completely misguided if you just measure one putt and then you conclude from the data to performance of the player. So we do something like an assessment, a baseline assessment of your fingerprint, of your pattern in putting. And this has two kind of like a metal, two sides. The front side, we see your technique. On the back side, we see your repeatability. So we have different options to use either a tripod, which normally is used out on the putting course if you don't want to carry this putt station along. But indoors, we would use a putt station. You click it on. We will talk about video later. So if you use the putt station, calibration is pretty simple. So now in this case, we have decided to register 7 putts. And this is a screen which is just thought to control the measurement. So you should not provide any feedback to the student while he's going through this assessment. The idea is that he is playing 7 putts, not just in a row. It should be not a repetition of the putt. It should also not be a compensation to the previous putt. It should be 7 times the same putt, but restarted new all the time. So including pre-shot routine, including aim, including the timing and the sequencing and the preparation for the putt. So it should be as natural as possible to then see the differences. So what you need to do if you have a station, you clip a sensor onto the shaft. If you have a station roughly at a height of 25 centimeters and roughly square to the putter face, it doesn't really count. So even if it is not perfectly squared up, it would be corrected because we calibrate the station. If you have a tripod, it is a little bit different. If you have a tripod, you need to use a calibration sheet, but this is also possible. It just takes a little bit more effort and time. But indoors, you have a calibration. And so if I step over to the unit, I think you might still hear me because I'm going a little bit, I have a microphone in front of me, but I hope you can still hear me. So actually what we do is that we start the measurement by activating the sensor. Now the sensor is sending. Once I bring it in front of the receiver unit, you see there is already a signal, and then we have 2 ways of calibrating, which is one direct calibration or a countdown calibration. So first of all, before I set up everything in here. I calibrated the unit relative to the target with a laser. So I extend this ruler, which you can see here. And then I use the laser. And then with this laser, I orient this setup to the target. And afterwards, I orient the putter relative to the station. I will do this now. So I press the V button. The countdown starts. And that's it. So now the system is perfectly calibrated and I can just go on with my putting. I hit my 7 putts and in between I can do practice putts. I can walk around. I can even do putts without a ball if I'm at the right position. If I'm not at the right position, the putts would not be recorded. So let me just make one putt. Okay, and then the putt is recorded. Certainly you can also delete the putts. You can see some live data down here, which is then used to control the putts. And then afterwards, you store the putts and then you are through. There are maybe some aspects which are important if you calculate the data relative to a tour data sample. We normally would assume that the distance for the putt is between 3.5 to 4 meters. So that's 12 to maybe 15 feet. We would normally select a straight putt. If you have a break, you would try to find out where the aim spot is, and then you would calibrate to the aim spot because your aim spot would be shown as 0 in SAM PuttLab data. So it is important that you know where the aim spot is if there is a break. Otherwise, if you're indoors, you should roll your surface to make it as flat as possible. You certainly can use it outdoors. You can use it if there is a break by calibrating it to the break, which has been maybe identified before the student gets into the situation. You can also use it for short and for very long putts. There is no problem with that. Just the limitation is maybe that if you want to directly compare to the tour data sample, you should be in a range between maybe 2.5 to 5, 6 meters. Otherwise, the data is becoming a little bit off. Well, if I self-calibrate, so actually to self-calibrate, I only need to press the C button. So as I'm alone here, I can actually not really do that. I can demonstrate it in a way that I hold the putter in front of the unit and then I press the C button and then it's immediately calibrated. So immediate calibration would only be used if you have a student. So as you normally have a student, you would probably use your student to calibrate by holding the putter into the right position yourself, which is holding it against this ruler, which is already calibrated to the target. And then your student would simply press the C button on the keypad. So we don't want the student to be involved into the calibration of the putter, because otherwise he would recognize that the calibration might already show some of his misaim tendencies, because you are now squared up and the student would find out that his aim, the perception of his aim is maybe different of what is indicated by the laser. So the student could help you to directly calibrate by pressing the C button. And that's a good idea to do that, because then the student is away from the putter and doesn't have any information about the square aim. So you have the C button for direct calibration and the V button for the 10-second countdown if you want to do everything on your own. Okay. Now, maybe 2 words to the environment. There is some criticism saying, well, if you are indoors and putting, is this really comparable to outdoor putting? We have done a lot of research on that. We know a lot of tour players, which we tested indoors and outdoors, and we compared the results. And basically, you see the same pattern. Sometimes, if you make things too easy indoors, the results are slightly better indoors. In particular, if we talk about aim, and this has to do with orientation. So if you use a putting mat and you are standing parallel to a putting mat, then aim is much more easy as compared to outdoors. So this is maybe something you should think of if you are planning to build up an indoor studio for putting, that your putting mat is wide enough to also putt a little bit across. So not perfectly at an angle which is parallel to the edge of the mat. So let's say the mat has a width of 1.5 meters or 2 meters, or the putting area, and then you can just skew it a little bit so that you're off the line, and then he needs definitely to aim relative to his perception and cannot use the help of the edge. Or you use a mat with rounded edges, or you put the mat somewhere also not parallel to a wall. So just avoid to make everything parallel to get a more realistic result of aim problems. But to look at the baseline pattern of putting performance, you will see that indoors and outdoors, it's just the same. Yes, for calibration, we use the laser, so you can use the laser to calibrate certainly the setup with a station. But if you are using a tripod, then at the setup position, you need to put the laser just in front of your putter face, and then if the laser points to the target, then at this angle you calibrate. So this is a different way of calibration. As I said, with the tripod, it's a little bit more complicated, as you need to calibrate the putter with a laser. And if you have a station, you no longer need the laser for the calibration, because you can just press the putter against the station. So actually, calibration is very simple doing it, and it's extremely accurate. And if you look at the data afterwards, you need to be sure that the calibration was right. Because the calibration of angle is just a reference for everything you see afterwards in the reports. And actually, as we are not talking about, well, it's about a degree left, so we are really looking at data which is 0.1 degree accurate. You need to be sure that 0.0 is exactly to the target. And because we want to be so accurate, and because PuttLab is so accurate, we even have a problem with the lasers, because we are much more accurate than the lasers. So all our lasers which we send out are recalibrated to be more accurate as they would be if you just buy them on the free market, because the lasers itself are not accurate by 0.1 degree. And we have a specific setup to test the lasers also, to allow you to really be 100% sure that what zero is in our data is zero in reality also. So now let's assume you've hit your putts and you then afterwards save it. Now